business owner a bit down the road, because the first thing is to recognize, it's like I was just talking to a friend of mine today who, it's one of those deals where, you know, in some ways I'm very, very far to the left and he's very, very far to the right, and then we end up coming back together in many ways because we both hate big corporations. And whenever I start attacking capitalism, he like starts to correct me because, and I still hate capitalism, don't worry. But he'll start to correct me and say what we really have now is monopoly capitalism.
Yes.
Which of course is the end game of capitalism anyway. But
yeah.
but leaving that aside, I want to tell one quick story about this. That years ago I was that sort of has to do with my approach to all these questions, which is that I was getting firewood way up in the National Forest of northeastern Washington, and I got a flat tire. I was getting from slash piles. Got a flat tire, and I'm not going to walk out some miles, so I thump along at 1 mile an hour till I get to this guy's house. And I ask him if he's got a pump, and he doesn't, but he's got a spare. He gives me a spare. I drive home, and then the next day I fix up my tire, and then I take his tire back, and I take him a cake. He invites me in, and we have a piece of cake, and it's all nice. And then he says, by the way, do you want some firewood? I got plenty of firewood. He's a logger. It's very clear he's a logger. And then I say, sure, that'd be great. So we go out, and he's standing there holding a chainsaw, and he says, by the way, what do you do? I'm like, oh, shit. I'm a writer. He says, what do you write? I'm thinking, science fiction. Words. And I'm not a very good liar, so I said to him, well, I'm working on a book. When I was writing Railroads and Clear Cuts, I said I'm writing a book about how the big four timber companies got their land illegally from the public domain. And he starts swearing and turns red in the face, and I'm looking for a break in the fence. And it takes about 20 seconds to realize, or 10 seconds, it's probably about 2 seconds, but it seemed like about a year, to realize that he was an independent logger who had been put out of business by Plum Creek Timber Company. He hated Plum Creek even worse than I did, which I didn't think was possible. And he knew more about them than I did. And so it takes us another 30 seconds before we got our arms around each other's shoulders, swapping atrocity stories of how much we hate Plum Creek. And then I said, I got to tell you, I'm against all industrial logging. So after you and I work together to take down Plum Creek, I'm coming after you. And then he just laughed and laughed and laughed, because we both knew that it's going to take our lifetime to take down Plum Creek. And so the point is, we can have a theoretical difference on capitalism with some small business owner, but they're not the problem.
Yeah.
And so let's save them for after the revolution, and then we'll fight that one out. And then so far as the leaderless thing, okay, so once again, I think any uprising is a good uprising, but I would have some questions about leaderlessness, which is one of the questions is how do you formulate a strategy without, I think the consensus can only take you so far in terms of strategy and in terms of organization. And I think that there are great strengths to having a leaderless movement, and I think there are weaknesses as well. And I think that those should be discussed openly, and that as a movement, or as several movements actually, people should begin to I think part of the problem is that within this culture, authority is so often and so consistently misused that we forget that there have been models for effective leadership within other cultures where authority is not misused. And a great personal example of this, and then I'll shut up, is that I think about this when I used to go hunting when I lived in eastern Washington. I was a terrible hunter. All the animal rights people, don't worry, no deer were ever hurt. So the only thing I ever got was lost. And, anyways, so we'd go hunting, and the other people would go hunting, and I would get lost. And they were actually very good hunters. They were very experienced hunters, let me put it that way. I was, from the perspective of deer, I was an extremely good hunter, because I was completely ineffectual. Anyway, so we would, as we drive out, as we're all in the pickup, we're all equals. And then as soon as they get out of the pickup and they hand me a gun, they're in charge. And I do exactly what they say. Because otherwise, we were playing with weapons. Somebody could die. And so, like, the first thing that the guy who taught me how to hunt ever said to me is, when we went out shooting, he handed me a gun, and he said, if you ever want to move the gun from one side of me to the other, you point it at the ground and move it across. He said, if you ever once cross me with a gun, loaded or unloaded, crosses like that, I will never go anywhere with a gun with you again. He was a leader. Did he abuse me? No. And when we were in the truck, was he a leader? No. If we were going to, he was also a better fisherman than I was, and he was a leader. He would decide what we did. But I gotta be better at something. Maybe I'm better at poker. If we were playing poker, maybe I don't know. It's something I would be better at. But the point is that he was a leader in those circumstances. He was also my supervisor at school prior to that, and he was frankly my leader there. Gosh, what do you know? Somebody older than me that I respected, who was in most areas where we had an intersection. He was actually, I deferred to him. What do you know? Do you want to say anything about it?
I think that we're going to get tripped up if we keep insisting that it's leaderless, because it's not. There's always natural leadership in any group. And I think it's better to acknowledge that, to train people to do it well, to give them the power to make their decisions well, and just to make it transparent. Because if you keep pretending that it's not there, I've just been in way too many groups that fell apart over this. We kept pretending, and it's just not true. And it would be so much better to just say it out loud. You're really good at talking to the press. Let's give you that job, and you can train the other people who might be good at it. Meanwhile, you're really good at making sure the food gets there on time, and God knows we don't function if we're not fed. So you can train them in the kitchen, and everybody has their skills and their gifts and their genius. So let them do it. I think it's ultimately a much better way. And I think there's sort of an amorphous phase where people are figuring out, how do I actually have a voice? Most of us have been so silenced our whole lives that I think that's an incredibly important phase. But for this to go anywhere further, I think we're going to have to admit that there are leaders, and that those leaders need support, and they need training, and they need to be held accountable. And that I think that's a better model than pretending that it's not happening when it actually is.
I think that's the biggest thing is accountability. Which we haven't done with our own government.
No,
I think
that's not at all.
Yeah, obviously it started here and here and here. It's continually gone down to down the path we're on now. Let's see. Around the nation, local governments are evicting the camps based on the violence that are supposedly taking place or are taking place, the drug use. Those ideas that they've come to terms with saying you need to get out because it's unsafe for the public.
Never mind the fact that they destroy water supplies through fracking. There are places called Cancer Alley. I don't see them evicting chemical corporations over Cancer Alley. Sorry, I don't see them evicting BP over oil spills. I don't see them. We could go all through the list. I don't see them. I don't see them evicting men for beating the shit out of women.
Yeah.
That
actually came up. Speaking of that, is how
maybe for the safety of people in Pakistan, the United States should stop using drones, using the same logic.
Yeah. I mean, like Herman Cain, they were talking on the radio the other day about how the Republican Party was backing him up when they were talking about this sexual abusing the women and harassing them, all these illegal things. But the second that he comes out and says that he has a loving, caring, it's granted it was an affair, but it wasn't anything illegal, then they turn on him. Like, how messed up is that? Where he's doing these illegal things and they're like, oh, whatever, they're liars, and then one like I said, maybe morally wrong in most people's eyes, but nothing illegal, and they're turning their backs going, see you later.
I think forcing a woman's head into your crotch is also morally wrong.
Well, sure. Only morally wrong. Since these are the symptoms of our society, however, should we be addressing these issues and continuing with the camps? So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Obviously, we have to address those issues in society as a whole, but it's more based off of should we try to be fixing these, and are the camps still a viable thing in the movement? Or
should we be fighting for the camps?
Yeah, should we still be fighting for those, or do you think we've, as a movement, from what you can see, we have moved kind of beyond that and should be doing other things besides worrying about where this camp's going to move once we get evicted again?
Well, they're going to be continuously evicted, and the problem with a lot of movements, especially when they first start and they don't really have training in terms of strategy, is that they will often try to hold territory before they can. And holding territory is an incredibly expensive proposition because you're going up against usually the army, the police, there's the armed force of the state, and so and you're never going to win.
It has been very expensive.
So ultimately, I don't think it's going to work. I mean, you'd have to have an incredible infrastructure for the resistance movement in order to actually hold territory. And so I think up to date, what the Occupy movement has done is really a form of witnessing, which is a good thing to be doing. But you're going to have to move on to the next step, which is to actually confront power and to actually start trying to force power to change. And I like this idea about, in Oakland when they blockaded the port, and I know there's a call to do that again. But those can't just be symbolic one-day actions. We're going to have to go in wave after wave after wave and actually occupy that machine. And toward that end, there actually is a call to occupy the machine, which you can read about online, that Deep Green Resistance is putting forward as a strategy. But this is going to have to go to the next level, which is to actually directly confront and take apart some of those institutions. It's really the only way. So I don't think that long term it's really sustainable to keep holding territory when we don't have the resources to do that. So
I agree with that statement.
Yeah, I agree too. There's a couple sort of different directions I want to go with that. One of them is that, yes, I think people need to make sure that the places, in the meantime, people need to make sure that these camps are clean and safe. And when I talked at the Occupy the Machine in DC, one of the things I said is I've been told by numerous women that they felt unsafe going to the porta toilets at night, and that was a very straightforward thing that the organizers could do to improve the situation, is to provide escorts. And it's terrible. We need to do that in the first place. But the point is that there are things that one can do to actually alleviate some of those problems. And at the same time, we need to recognize that those in power will use. We shouldn't be paralyzed by the fact that those in power will use any excuse they can. We should just recognize, yes, we need to make it clean and safe because that's a good thing to do, not because that will stop us from being evicted. And
they'll have a reason.
What?
They'll have a reason.
They'll have a reason. It'll be because it's Saturday, or because it's because they don't like somebody's shoes, or who knows what. They'll make something up, or it'll be because it's unsafe, even though it's not unsafe.